to everyone that's watching me on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Listen, holla at your girl. I am so ready to give you what God has given unto me. All right. So I have got to tell y'all, like, y'all know, shout out to my MOCI family, Monte Christ International in Alabaster, Alabama, where I pastor alongside my super phenomenal husband, Senior Pastor Derek Moore. Said, I got to shout my boo thing out. Okay, listen, he gave a powerful message on Sunday. And I told him, I said, listen, I'm going to bring that to the podcast, but don't worry, I will shout you out. Okay. Like, he encouraged me to share this with you guys, because let me tell you again, we are in harvest season, and in harvest season, there's a reaping that has to take place. There's a gathering of your blessings. You got to go get it. Yeah. Go get your blessing. Come on, Mary, Mary. You got to go get them blessings in harvest season. And so, with that being said, when we're in harvest season and we're ready to go get a blessing, we're ready to go get that favor, we're ready to go get that next thing that God has for us. Sometimes, a lot of times, majority of the times, that next thing that God has for us doesn't come so easily. And my husband, Senior Pastor Derek Morissette, gave the perfect example of the lame man. And I don't, you guys walk with me a little bit. The lame man was in a harvest season where he was about to experience healing and deliverance like never before. He was lame on a mat, and he was surrounded by some friends, and they knew that Jesus was in a particular house. And so the friends, the people that he was with, said, y'all know the story. They couldn't get through the crowd, so they got on the rooftop for him to go get his blessing. Matter of fact, they tore the roof up, okay, so that they could pull the man down in the presence of the feet of Jesus. Now, let me tell y'all something. In this harvest season is a time of a reaping. Season is a season of reaping. It's a season of gathering the blessing. But in order to reap or to gather the blessing, you got to go get the blessing. You see, here's the thing about the lame man that was surrounded by his friends that tore the roof off to get him to Jesus. The thing was that the lame man, in order for him to receive the harvest of healing, he had to go get it. Now, listen, oftentimes when we say, okay, harvest season, breakthrough season, another level season, we think about the limits that we have. For example, like if God says start a business and then you say, well, I don't have all the money and I don't have all the support. We immediately, a lot of times, go to the lack, right? But think about it like this. The lame man that was on his mat, he had a lack, right? He couldn't walk. He couldn't get to Jesus personally. And so instead of making an excuse as to why he couldn't go reap his blessing, come on, somebody, there was another way. Listen, everything is figure outable. You just got to make sure you're in the right atmosphere, in the right environment, surrounded by the right people. Everything is figure outable. Let me tell you, the lame man, because he was in a harvest season where he was about to reap a blessing, where he could take up his mat and actually walk and live with the harvest of healing on his life. He didn't make an excuse as to, I can't go get the harvest because I'm lame. We can't make excuses in this season as to why we can't reap a harvest that God has prophetically set aside for us. Like, there are things prophetically that are waiting on us to bust a move. Come on, somebody. And sometimes you got to bust a move on the head of the devil. Sometimes you got to bust a move over your fear. Sometimes you got to bust a move over your lack. Sometimes you got to bust a move over your doubt, your insecurity, whatever it is. But the lame man had to bust a move. He just couldn't bust a move with his own 2 feet. So guess what he did? He used the feet of others. Come on, y'all. There were other people that were connected to the lame man that were able to push him into reaping the harvest that God had for him. What was his particular harvest? His particular harvest was healing. His particular harvest was a breakthrough in healing, that he could take up his mat, he could walk, he could live the life that God needed him to live, he could be who God destined him to be, but he did not make an excuse as to why he couldn't reap when it was a season of harvest on his life. He made sure that he connected to the right people. Let me tell you something. In this season of harvest, when we are called to go and reap blessings, reap means to gather. When they say you reap what you sow, that means you're going to gather what you've sown. So in this harvest season, when we are called to go and reap a blessing, that means that we are called to go and gather it. Come on, somebody. And we cannot make an excuse as to why we can't go and gather the blessing that God has prophetically set aside with your name on it. There are things that God has set aside for us in this now season that we have to be the big man. We got to be the big girl. We got to be the big boy. That we got to go and we got to make sure that we are putting our hands to the plow and not looking back. Now, listen, when God has called you in this hour and this season to go and reap, which is all of us, but here's the thing about it, all of us are not going to manifest it. All of us are not going to go because God, this is a heart. Listen, everybody, sons and daughters of God, this is a harvest season. This is a harvest season. Harvest season means that there is a time of reaping. Reaping means that is a time for you to go out and gather some things. And in the gathering, you cannot make an excuse as to why you can't gather. Everything is figure outable. Now, let me tell you something. What Pastor Derek gave us, his point on Sunday was this. It says, one, you can't stay where you are and experience God at the next level. For example, the man that was lame on his mat, he knew that he could not experience healing where he was at on his mat, isolated from Jesus, not in Jesus's presence. He knew that if he was going to go to another level, he couldn't stay in this place. God is telling us in this now season that as we get ready for this next level in the things of him, we cannot stay in the same place and expect a reaping of something different. And so what the lame man did was he made sure he was connected to people that would help get him out of the same place that he had been in for I don't know how many years. And so if we are going to reap this harvest, this abundance, this breakthrough, this healing, this deliverance that has our name all over it, we cannot sit in the same place and say, okay, I'm going to go get my blessing. You can't go get it if you still in the same position you were in yesterday, last week, last month, last year. You got to go and bust a move. You got to do something different. You cannot get it if you still going to be the same old depressed person, the same old person with anxiety, the same old person with fears and stuff. If you're going to do it, you got to bust a move, get out of that position, and you got to do it scared. You got to do it while you're insecure. You got to do it right. It's all about getting to another level and getting out of the level that you are, meaning that you got to disposition yourself from where you're at so that you can reposition yourself to something greater. Sometimes that's in relationships. Sometimes it's a mindset. Sometimes it's financially. Sometimes you think about it like this, if you know that you're called to greater, you may be in a time in a season where you may have to take on a second job. You may have to take on something. You got to do something different because let me tell you, you can't expect the harvest, the reaping, if you're in the same position. You can't stay where you are and experience God at the next level. It's time to bust a move into newness. It's time to bust a move into something greater, far beyond anything that you could imagine. But you got to go and you got to do it scared. We think about somebody like Abraham. Abraham, who became the father of many nations. God credited his faith as righteousness. Abraham knew that he had to do something different if he was going to experience God at a whole nother level. So what did Abraham have to do? He had to reposition himself. God said, go. And he didn't tell him where to go, but he knew that if he was obedient in the going, if he was obedient in getting out of the same position that he had been in for years, around familiar people, around his family, around everything that he knew that what God was putting in him was big. And if he was going to experience it, he had to do something different. That means that he had to take steps in a new direction. He had to and sometimes it's not necessarily physical steps. Again, it could be a mental step. Sometimes you have to take a mental step in a new direction. Sometimes it's a physical step in a new direction. Sometimes it's a financial financial step in a new direction. In taking a financial step, God may be telling you to sow a seed. Okay, sow a seed so that you could take a steps towards a new direction that God has for you. And so God may tell you to sow a seed. God may tell you to take on a second job. God may tell you to start a business. God may tell you to write a book. See, all of these are you not staying where you're at, but you're being led by the Spirit of God to do something different. You're being led because you know that if you do something different, you will get different results. But if you stay in that same place on that same mat, talking about you lame, talking about the ain't gots, you're gonna continue to manifest what you've already always manifested. The lame man knew that he had to reposition himself in the presence of God. But here's another thing, he also knew that he couldn't do it by himself. He's on a mat, he can't move. So he knew that he could not do it by himself, which leads me to the next point of what Pastor Derek gave me. He said, your association will determine your destination. So the lame man is on a mat, right? He knew that alone he couldn't do it by himself. He had to connect with the right people that will push him into greatness, that will challenge him into greatness, that will say, no, you know what? If one door closes, we're gonna have to figure out a better way. Like you think about it, the people that were around his friends, were around the lame man, they couldn't get to Jesus through the crowd. It was too much. It was too crowded. But they said, you know what? Everything is figure outable. What we're about to do is we're going to find another way to reap the harvest that God has for us. And staying in this position is not going to do it. And so the lame man had to make sure that he was connected to the right people so that he could reap the right harvest. I'm going to say that again. The lame man had to make sure that he was connected to the right people so that he could reap the right harvest. Because when you're connected to the wrong people, you can also reap a harvest, but it's not the harvest that you had intended on reaping. And it could very well not be the harvest that God wanted you to reap. So being around the right people is a big deal in this hour. So you got to look at your association. Sometimes it's not having the association. Sometimes you got to look around you and say, you know what? I need to be connected to someone that has boom, 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 boom. That could mean you could get in a Facebook group. You could go pay a coach and be in a community of people that are doing things that you want to do or talking the way you want to talk. But you got to figure out where you are missing associations. And you got to understand, some of us are loners. We say, well, I don't need nobody. Yes, you do. Even Jesus needed people. So you got to find the right people because chances are that you have been broken in the past, you've been hurt in the past by the wrong people. But it's in this time that you got to make sure that you're connected to the right people so that you can get the right manifestations. And you got to figure out where the wrong associations are because your association will determine your destination. The associations that the lame man had, they made sure that that my bro got what he needed. They made sure they like, listen, we're not gonna let you fall on your face. We're not gonna let you sit here and mope and moan and groan about you can't make it happen. That's why you connected to us. That's why we with you. We down like 4 flat tires. And so you gotta make sure that your connections in this harvest season are very critical because your connections are the ones that could help you manifest the very thing that you have been believing God for such a time as this. And so the lame man was associated and connected with the right people. All right. And also, look, here's another thing that my husband gave me. He said, your opposition will cause you to change your position. Your opposition will cause you to change your position. If you think about the lame man, sometimes when opposition comes, a lot of people, and this could go in either direction. Your opposition can make you change your position for the good, or your opposition can make you change your position for the bad. Like for me, like when I was struggling, broke, busted, and disgusted, depressed, regressed, everything, when I was mentally and spiritually not in the right place, The opposition that I felt, that I sensed, that I picked up on, it made me not want to move forward. It made me want to sit still like an ugly duckling. It made me want to sit in mess. It made me want to not be who I know God needed me to be. Why? Because I faced opposition in the natural. And what it did was it messed with my mental health went down. I was depressed. I was angry. And so opposition allowed me to not progress. It caused me to regress. Why? Because I wasn't mature enough to handle opposition. And this season, you got to make sure that you're mature enough to handle opposition, because opposition is there to push you into a greater dimension of who God needs you to be. Opposition is there to challenge you for the greater good of your destiny. Opposition is there to show you something that you need to figure out. So if we look at the lame man that was lying there on that mat, he faced opposition through the crowd. Like, he could not get to his destination because something was standing in his way. But instead of backing back and backing down and saying, oh, you know what, it's not my season. You know what, I'm gonna try this again next season. Instead of backing down and backing back, he had the right people around him to ensure that he would not back down, that he would not back. When I think about myself, when I was going through what I was going through, I pushed away the people that were trying to help me. And see, you got to be careful in this thing called life, that when you're growing through something, because that's what I was doing. Going through is growing through to me. When you're growing through something, you got to make sure that you're not pushing away the people, the right people who are trying to speak into your life, because those are the people that will tear the roof off to get you in the presence of God. That will tear the roof off, that will send a prayer up, that will fast for you, that will speak life into you when you need it the most. Those are the people that will help you. But when, for me, years ago, back then, I remember pushing those very people away because I wanted to be on my own island. And that opposition, that mindset, that delayed me manifesting my harvest. Why? Because I chose to push away the very ones that were helping me, because I felt like I got this. I felt like I ain't want to talk to nobody. I felt like I ain't need nobody. You know what? I'm just gonna figure this thing out myself. And God is like saying, no, one can set 1,000 aflight. You are very limited in what you can do when it's just you. He said one can set 1,000 aflight, but two could set 10,000. Just imagine if you had 3, 4, 5 folk around you, the right people now, the right people pushing you in the right direction. Just imagine what you can do when you're surrounded by the right people. Those people will help you conquer any opposition that you could ever face. And so you just have to make sure that you are checking yourself, or you wreck yourself. See, I didn't check myself. When I was going through the heaviness and the burdens and all of that stuff years ago, I didn't check myself. Matter of fact, I fed my depression. I fed my insecurities. I fed my hurt. I fed it. I fed it. I didn't try to come out of it. And I didn't try to tackle opposition. I let opposition tackle me. And when I allowed opposition to tackle me, it set me back for manifesting the blessing that God had for me. And so I couldn't reap a harvest because I was killing the harvest. I was trampling on it with the heaviness of the life that I was living. I was trampling on it with all the issues in my tissue and all the junk in my trunk. I wasn't purging. I wasn't detoxing. I was just adding in more weight. The more I thought about my burdens, the more I thought about my have nots, the more I thought about my situation, the heavier I became. And I allowed opposition to overcome me. But when you can overcome opposition, I'm telling you, you are headed in the direction that God needs you to be in for such a time as this, because God got some good stuff on the horizon for all of us. We just got to make sure that we're not allowing opposition to beat us down. We're not allowing opposition to steal, to rob us of the very thing that God has for us. Okay. And so I got one more. Your action determines God's reaction. Pastor Derek gave us that. I was like, wow, that is so true. Your actions determine God's reaction. Now, listen, when you are when you are heavy, when you are burdened, when you're not fasting, when you're not praying, when you're not talking to God, when you're not walking by faith, let me tell you a truth. This is a truth. Your All of that delays manifestation of what God has for you. I'm gonna say that again. All of that, when you're walking in fear and doubt and depression, heaviness, oppressed, regress to foolish ways, when your talking ain't right, when you're not talking positive, but you're talking crazy, when you're not speaking the language, the love language of God. You know what the love language of God is? It has to do with faith. When you're not speaking faith, God can't God can't move in that. Why? Because scripture says that without faith it's impossible to please God. So this is where we have to take a moment and ask ourselves, am I displeasing God and delaying the harvest because I'm not really walking in faith? You have to check yourself. You have to ask yourself, God, where is my unbelief at? Like the man in the Bible said, Lord, I believe, but help me with the part that has disbelief. You have to make sure that you are not walking in disbelief. You have to make sure that your disbelief is not blocking the next level of what God has for you, because God can't move in disbelief. It is faith that pleases God. It is faith that's going to open the door for you. It's faith that's going to open the door for me. God couldn't move in my depression because in my depression, I had a lot of disbelief. I had a lot of insecurity. And in that I couldn't move God. And God moves through faith. So when the lame man, uh his friends, his associates moved him from the crowd to the top of the roof, opened up the roof, dropped them down, their actions caused God to move on their behalf because it was faith that God sees. When God sees faith, you'll see blessings. Well, I'm going to say that again. When God sees faith, you'll see blessings manifest. Why? Because that's what's going to move God. And so you got to make sure in this harvest season that you are walking in faith, not doubt and disbelief, because faith is what's going to cause you to go and reap what you have been believing God for. Your actions will determine God's reaction. Your actions will determine exactly how God is going to move on your behalf. And so you got to ask yourself, how do I want God to move? What do I want God to do? How do I want God to do it? Because you could tell God, this is what I want in this season. This is what I'm believing in this season. But God is saying, okay, show me your faith. Because faith without works is dead. So when God said, you tell God, God said, okay, show me your faith. What does show me your faith means? Show me your faith means show me your works. So what are you doing to work towards God manifesting exactly what you're praying about? So you say, God, show me this blessing. God is responding back to you, daughter, son, show me your faith. You be like, well, how do I show you my faith? You show me your faith by showing me your works. Abraham showed God his faith by taking steps in a direction that he had no clue where he was going. He had no clue what he was doing, but he showed God his faith by showing him the works of his hands, the works of his feet, the works of his mouth. Show God your faith by showing him your works. And I'm telling you, God will give you access to all the blessings that you've been believing him for. All right, y'all, that's it for today, okay? I pray that this has blessed you, this has stirred you, this has catapulted you, this has challenged you, this is just really taking you to another level so that you can reap that abundant thing that God has for you for such a time as this. All right, y'all, I love y'all. I will take this to the outro, and your girl gonna see y'all on next week, okay? Mwah. Thanks for tuning in to Fab Talk with Trish M. Do your girl a favor. Share this broadcast on all your social media platforms. Invite a friend to tune in. Help this podcast reach the nation. We all need Jesus, y'all. You sharing this broadcast helps me to reach the masses. If I'm blessing you, then bless your girl back. Share the broadcast. Give me a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. I got work to do for the King, and I need your help. I appreciate you tuning in. to this segment, I'm looking forward to rocking with you on the next episode of Fab Talk with your girl, Trish M.